Hi everyone, it's Tiny Tom Logan back with another video for you, and today we are going to be putting the new 1650 and the 2-year-old RX 570 head to head. Now, when I first did the 1650 review, I did want to put the RX 570 with a new batch of tests into the graphs, but sadly when the 570s originally come out, weirdly, it was some samples that just got rotated. It was a low-end card, there wasn't a massive amount of focus on it. Vendors actually didn't get that many of them, so then they moved them around. I know a lot of you think that whatever the reviewer gets his hands on, he gets to keep, but it's not always the way. And weirdly, it's normally the cheap ones that do get moved around. So when the 1650 did first come out, I got hold of AMD to see if I could get another one. Asus, for example, Gigabyte and MSI didn't have any samples, and it would have involved them having to buy one basically from a retailer. So I asked AMD, and this was literally the last one that they had, and it actually came from the Netherlands as well. Now in this test, this one is an 8GB card, but we've done all of our testing at 1080p. So in reality, you could use the 4GB one for all of these graphs, all of these tests, and they would pretty much be exactly the same. You only really get a benefit when you up the resolution, and we've done you'll see when you see the game test in a minute, because we've laid them out fairly easily for you to actually be able to sit and watch with them side by side. Now this 570 comes in around $144.99 at the moment. Selected retailers you can go and find them at. But if you get the 4GB one, bearing in mind that in the test today, the performance will be the same, that's only $124.99. Now, there are a range of 1650s available. You can obviously get some of them out there from $137.99, but the EVGA that we're using today is actually $160. And I've not picked the EVGA for any other reason than it's got, you know, a half decent cooler on it. It's quite nice. A lot of them are £150 plus once you put better coolers on them and stuff like that. But to be honest with you, if you want to just assume it as being a £140 one, you can do. I have done a review on the Palette one. It was a very cut back kind of budget orientated card. Will perform around this, maybe a little bit under it. But you get the kind of idea. It's just we chose the EVGA for this one just to bring it out so that it does look kind of nice. The EVGA is one of the few with the extra 6-pin on it. Doesn't really need it. In reality, it doesn't particularly get it anywhere. So you could just say this is just the one that we're using for the video, and it will count for any of the 1650s out there. One thing I will say about the MSI card is it is a little bit bigger than all of the 1650s. It will use more power than all of the 1650s. It will also be hotter than all of the 1650s. But will it be faster than all of the 1650s as well? And one of the things I will say before we move into the testing, we're going to try a slightly different way for the gameplay and the benchmarks and stuff to be laid out this time, which I would love to get some feedback from you underneath. But in reality, at this kind of price point, isn't it all about the FPS rather than if it's a few degrees warmer? And also, if you can get a quicker card for less money at around the kind of 150, even £125 mark, surely that's what it's all about. But anyway, let's have a look at them side by side. We're going to do, it'll all be 1080p, but we are going to be doing some low, medium, high stuff. Excuse me. Keep an eye on the temperatures as well, because we're trying to give you a lot of information in the screen as we can, and we're also going to be doing some quality comparisons as well. So if you see anything pop up that says pause, that's literally us just freezing it for you so that we can have a little bit of a discussion. But I think it's time to give these two a run. Now, World War Z does actually come in the bundle with a 570 at the moment. You do get World War Z, another game with any of the 500 series cards at this present moment in time. What you should have a look at here is, yes, okay, you've got a 7-degree difference in temperatures, but at Ultra, you're still getting a solid 10 frames per second more, and that's without Vulkan. If you have a look in the bottom right-hand corner, we've got the Vulkan results down there, and the only reason why you've not seen it in the video is you can't get the active overlay working with Vulkan API running in the background. So we just put it down in that bottom corner. So if you did have the AMD card and you weren't fussed about overlays, then you can get another 4 frames per second out of it as a minimum. The maximum is 120, and as you can see there, the average across the entire benchmark would be 83 frames per second. Another pause point, Far Cry 5. Now, one thing I will say for this is, because I did say it trades places, the AMD, in my opinion, in this benchmark, does actually come out with a lot more detail. So when you zoom in on this tree, for example, the difference between the AMD and the NVIDIA is almost like the difference that I would expect from something like medium to high or ultra, not both the same ultra presets. I'd also say specifically in Far Cry 5 that the AMD colour looks much better. It's a lot deeper. There's the NVIDIA almost looks a bit washed out. So if you're a Far Cry fan, the actual AMD side of things does end up giving you a better gaming experience. It does just look that little bit nicer. It's like you've paid for a little bit for extra detail. It's considering they're being run at the exact same settings, they look very different. Now, with it paused on Battlefield 5 with Ultra mode, you can see that the frames per second are quite close. So you've got 61 versus 63 frames per second. You're probably not going to notice that in a game. Temperatures, there's a good kind of 14 degrees there difference, which is a fair bit, but we did know right from the start that the 570 was going to be a bit quicker. But something that we did want to pause and mention here is, if you have a look at the two pictures, they are noticeably different. With the NVIDIA on the left, it's a little bit lighter, and because of that you do see a little bit more detail. The AMD on the right hand side has just got that little bit more contrast to it, but because the darks or the blacks are much blacker, it does seem to get kind of bleached out into a lot more shadows. It's almost like it's got an excessive amount of HDR on. So, but if you do think about it, the fact that there is so much black there could actually be helping the frames per second on the AMD, because with the NVIDIA on the other side, it is actually having to render more detail. Now, that is just, you know, conjecture. It's just the fact, you know, we're just talking about it. But with this game specifically, it does, I would personally say that the NVIDIA side of things does look that little bit better. But as we have discussed, and as you're going to hear in a minute, it does trade places between the teams depending on what game you're playing. So just as 3D Mark finishes, you can see that you get an 8336 for the 1650, and then a fairly healthy, well, even more than healthy, 10356 for the RX 570. But if I was to just give you a cheeky little look of what would happen if you had the stock RX 570 on the left, and if you were to overclock it, the overclocked version on the right jumps up to 12557. Now if you think 12557 compared to 8336, and I'm not being funny, when you do overclock the 1650, you can check the main review on the OC3D website. It really doesn't go up even close to the stock 570. It's a big difference. So I'm hoping that you enjoyed that. It is a first for us, the way that we're trying to lay it out. So like I said, any feedback, that sort of thing, it will be something that will evolve. I don't expect to get it right the first time. So, you know, kind of just bear with us. We are trying something a little bit different. But at the end of the day, 1650 versus 570, it is quite clear, very, very clear, that the 570 pretty much owns it in everyone. Some of the games only are 3 or 4 frames per second, but a lot of the games were actually much more than that. You know, they went really well. This does actually respond very well to overclocking as well, much more than the 1650 does. But you do need to remember with these cards, when you do overclock them, they do use a lot more power pretty quickly, and they can get a bit warm as well. But with the 570, and specifically this Armour from MSI, this is where MSI, as far as I'm concerned, their strengths are, because their aggressively priced cards, like the Armour, do cool really well, but they don't ask a lot of money for them. And it's, for me, these are the ones that, if you are tight of money, looking for the lower priced MSI cards, this is actually probably what they're best at. So this is an outstanding 570. Like I said, you can get the 8GB version for 14499, or if you are tight on money and you know you are only going to be paying 1080p, I wouldn't worry too much about that 4GB frame buffer. Games nowadays, if you do hit that frame buffer, you can just back it off a little bit. And if you are tight on money, then sometimes you're just going to have to get used to the fact that you may not be able to run it on high or ultra for the actual like mega AAA games. You might need to knock it back a little bit. But if you can find an extra £20, £25, depending on where you get it from, then you could get the peace of mind from that 14499 price and still come in around the same sort of money as these, but with, let's face it, more performance in pretty much everything. The only thing that I would say is just make sure that you've got a little bit more case airflow, and also make sure that you've got a decent quality branded power supply to be able to power it. It's got the 8-pin on there for a reason. Please don't use Molex adapters or anything like that. If you do need to get yourself like a high quality branded power supply to be able to feed this. And like I said, just a little bit of case airflow as well, and you probably won't even know you've got it. So yeah, it does make you wonder where Nvidia's head was at about this, because at this price point, it does make you wonder. Now, we had a little bit of a hint anyway, because Nvidia didn't let the reviewers have drivers before NDA, so we got them on the same day that they went on sale, which is a little bit of a hint. And we also knew that it wasn't a massive focus for them. They were actually not, that we didn't get sent any cards directly from Nvidia at all, and pretty much all the other times we do. So it was something that we had to sort out with the vendors, and it is a very lackluster kind of launch. And I'm pretty much certain that, you know, these aren't necessarily going to even be a big seller for the e-tailers. I genuinely think it's going to be something that's just going to end up in low-end gaming systems moving forward. Because if you are an enthusiast and you have done your homework, then I don't see why you would want one of these in reality. And it's a third thing, and that goes for across the board as well. I think that if you're down at this price point, I'd save for a little bit longer and get a 1660 or a 1660 Ti, or if you are proper strapped for cash, buy something red and just enjoy those frames per second, and yeah, just get on with it. So in the grand scheme of things, if you said to me you've got £150 to spend on a graphics card, Tom, what would you spend your hard-earned money on? Be one of those.